Welcome to the Enneagram with Chelsea and Nicole. This episode, we are diving into what is the Enneagram? What a broad question, right? So let's get started. So what does Enneagram mean?
Well, the Enneagram means, Ennea means 9. And so the Enneagram is essentially, representing 9 types, 9 personality types. The visual, for those that you don't know, it's like a circle that's similar to a clock where 9 is at the top and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all the way around. One of the most important things that people don't realize is that the Enneagram is over 2,000 years old. So this is far beyond any of our other personality tools that we have today, which, have all probably been developed in the last 100 years or less. The interesting thing about that is that it's been tested over time and it's likely been in the hands of most all philosophical and psychological frameworks over the thousands of years.
Why are we just now hearing about it? Like, why is it within the last 5 or 10 years? And maybe this isn't your experience. It's certainly been my experience that even within the last 6 months, I've seen the Enneagram on a rise. Any insights into why it's the greatest kept secret up to this point?
It is kind of that way. I mean, I have been studying and practicing the Enneagram over 20 years. And so for me, it's always kind of been an integral part of my life that I sensed from the moment that I kind of started working with it, that it would become increasingly popular in the United States. But like I said, this is an ancient tool that has been around in humanity and is probably just making its rounds. And I think, my sense is, who knows? We don't know like how things become super popular and at what times they become popular, but it certainly was reintroduced into the States within our lifetime. And then I think that with increasing human problems, people are looking for different tools. And also the quality of the tools matter. And so the experience that people have with the Enneagram should be, if it's used correctly, deeply accurate and a little bit creepily so, where it's like, how is this, so accurate, because it's so super comprehensive, and it's not about identifying behaviors as much as it is about identifying kind of core drives, core motivations, and core brilliances that are built in or coded into who we are.
I've been introduced to so many personality types and leadership types, and they seem to be like the flavor of the month, whichever organizations are out there selling their model. And this is the first one that I haven't been able to stop thinking about for 5 years, over 5 years since I was introduced to it, whereas so many others have come and gone. And I think that they have lacked to really become embedded in many organizational structures because of their lack of complexity. They are actually quite surface because they try to put people in buckets. What is it about the Enneagram that makes it so complex?
Yeah, and this is a question that I think isn't asked often enough, which is, the purpose of the Enneagram is actually a little bit opposite of the other tools. The other tools are trying to, in essence, in practice, reducing the complexity of human relations into something a little bit more understandable and something that we can work with. Like, what are some of the, they're trying to find some essential qualities that is easy to identify and easy to work with. The Enneagram is actually trying to map the movement of human development and also human kind of disintegration. And that is a far more complex ambition, and its design really is transformational. So the Enneagram assumes that actually every human has all 9 types. So we all have 9 types within us. However, we have a core type that I call a default type, and that is the main one, the one that is primarily running us. And however, the goal is to be integrated into all the other 8 types. And the place to start that process is by knowing our core type. But is only the beginning. So the Enneagram begins, I think, where most other frameworks end. And so that's a significant difference. And there are several significant differences. So that's the first one, is that the goal is to actually be integrated into all 9 types. It actually includes more complexity and more comprehensive parts of our humanity. That is the goal. And so, when we're more singular and we're more one-dimensional, when we're only kind of rooted in our core default type, and without some consciousness, as most of us experience in our humanness, without really being more conscious and aware of what's running us, it's difficult to grow, and it's difficult to see our options. It's difficult to locate what and why we're doing what we're really doing. So the other part of the Enneagram that's pretty unique is it's actually uncovering the why, not the what. And the other tools tend to focus on what you're doing and what it is. What are the things about an individual? And the Enneagram is more interested in why. Why are you doing those things? So in other words, there's 9 types that can all behave identically. They can all be ambitious. They can all be super successful, intelligent. They can all be all these things, yet there's 9 different reasons why. There's 9 different motivations at the core of what they're doing in a way that comes from what's the source. So it's really more about the why.
I remember in college taking the strength finders, right? And taking the tests and being all excited. I'm an activator, I'm a relator, and all these things, which then as my professional career unfolded, gave me really excuses for why I was acting the way I was, but it was very surface level. But the interesting thing was that it became an excuse, and the strength finders concept preaches lean into that, do more of that. Whereas Enneagram, like you said, it shares the reason as to why I was acting as an activator. And when I start to unpack that and understand what was my motivation in taking all these projects and doing, becomes really, really powerful as you start to think of the Enneagram picking up where, in this case, strength finders left off, to give me a picture of the motivation, whether that was healthy or not, and allow myself to explore and grow from that. So within the Enneagram, how does growth occur?
I think it's important in some of these introduction conversations to make sure that people understand the purpose of the Enneagram and how holistic it is, how comprehensive it is, and thus actually requires a lot of discipline in understanding the framework and its complexities, honestly. And so I think that the tool is frequently misused, as all tools are. So it's both misused, and it's also, in its misuse, it can be weaponized, right? As you kind of have talked about, Chelsea, which definitely happens. And it can also be misused in the sense of worshipped. That when people have found, a super wonderful tool, humans tend to worship the tool, which I am very against that. Like, there are many tools. Enneagram's just one of them. It's a super powerful one. It's one I've chosen in terms of, personality tool. The things that humans do with our tools matters, and we need to keep that in mind. This idea that we can worship the tool and also deeply misuse the tool. So I think that we misuse it when we try to oversimplify it, or when we bring our arrogance to it, or when we try to justify our own behavior, or when we try to villainize, other people's, behavior or who they are. And when we do that, we actually lose contact with the most accurate part of the Enneagram, and then we just call it the Enneagram when it's not actually. So all 9 types, and I say this often, is that if you're listening to information about a type or reading something about a particular type, and you're not absolutely inspired in a way where you're like, I wish I was fucking that type. And if you don't feel that for every type, then whatever you're reading or what you're listening to, they have it wrong. And it's really difficult to do that. In terms of, it requires some mastery in order to really dive into each types and expose the absolute brilliance and how inspiring in what each one brings to the world and what each one teaches us. And it's also from there which we understand the misuses, how each of us in our core being, in Enneagram speak, how we can misuse our strengths. And that's when we become destructive, and we all misuse our strengths. So this is kind of important to understand, is that people become very quick to assume they understand the Enneagram by reading a book or by listening to a few podcasts, or to, experience the, the little, tip of the day. And really, when I read a lot of information or hear a lot of information that's being put out there, I always think to myself, well, that could also be applied to about 4 other types, right? Because it exists inside a matrix of variables that are very interdependent. And as soon as you extract one thing and then call it one thing, it's kind of irresponsible to not put it in context of all the others, and not put it in context of how we move and what makes us move. And are we moving to another type in certain behaviors, or is that from with our own? And all this becomes very complicated because of how and when and, what stages that we're in. So I'll kind of just leave it at that, Chelsea, because that's just I'm trying to remain introductory and broad, because as we continue to bring examples, I've found that that's the place to really kind of dive in to the complexities inside a particular example.
Awesome. I think that this is the perfect place to transition into what our next topic will be. We're going to continue to explore how the Enneagram compares and contrasts with other leading personality and leadership types. So stay tuned for that next episode. And thank you so much for joining us for this one.
Yeah.